Welcome to Come and See, RCIA Conversations. My name is Matt Gray, and I'm the RCIA Director of the Catholic Community of Pleasanton. RCIA stands for the Rite of Christian Initiation of Adults, and it's the program that we use to initiate adults through the sacraments of baptism, confirmation, and Eucharist. With us today are Sue Yu and Jeff August, and we'll get to your stories in just a minute. But the reason why we're here is to honor, to highlight, to celebrate our memories of our former pastor, Father Paul Minnihan. Because next week, on the 24th of February, we will mark the second anniversary of Father Paul's death. And I know that Father Paul was instrumental to the journey of each of you. Right, so let's just get into it. Sue, I know you came to us in 2013, and I believe Paul baptized you at Easter Vigil 2014.
Right.
You want to tell us something about what brought you to RCIA?
Yes. 2013, I was just at a major turning point in my life, and nothing was going the way I had planned. Even though being an avid learner of life, I knew something was missing. Something was missing in my life, and I found at the time, everything I was reading and people talk, it just all really connected to the Bible. So I thought instead of just going to all these other sources, why don't I just go to the main source, which is the Bible, the church. And at the time, a number of my close friends, unbeknownst to me, were Catholic. So I thought, okay. So then I literally just sent an email to info@ccop.org, whatever the email address at the time, and then that was how I got connected with you.
And there's a relationship, there's a special bond that happens when Paul baptized you, and between the adult and the priest that baptizes, to me there's a special relationship that happens there, right? And I'm sure it's the same with you, Jeff. I mean, technically you didn't come through the process of RCIA. You were confirmed as an adult only, right?
Yep.
In 2018 at Pentecost.
Yes. Yep.
Right. But still you experienced that same conversion, that transformation that others in the group would experience.
Yep. I think I feel very fortunate that at that time in my life, I realized that I had been looking at the world through a veil of disillusionment for a long time. And I didn't know how to not see the world through that veil. And even though I knew it was there, I didn't know how to deal with it necessarily. And I thought I grew up in a Catholic family, and I'd been baptized when I was a baby, and I had my first Eucharist when I was 8 years old. And when I was around 10 years old, my family started going to an Episcopalian church instead of a Catholic church. And at this time when I was thinking about this veil that I saw in front of me but didn't know how to deal with, I started to think about what were the things that I had done growing up that made me not feel, that made me feel good about the world. And so I realized a lot of it was church. And so I started to kind of go around and check out other churches, actually. I went to about 4 or 5. And eventually I just realized there was a magnet in my heart that went to the Catholic Church. And so I found myself in a faith formation class one night because of Father Paul, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But he introduced me to you, and I knew that night, before I, maybe 15 minutes into that faith formation, I knew that night, boy, I need to go, I need to finish, I need to do. To me, it's like, they're the 3 that you have to do, and I had not done confirmation, and so I needed to do it, and that's how I ended up here, and it was a great experience.
What was it about Paul that drew you in? And then I remember when we met after your conversation with Paul. Right?
Yes, yep.
But what was it about that?
Sure. Well, it's funny because I knew, like I said, I felt the draw of the Catholic Church. It was like a magnet. And so I did the same thing you did. I reached out via email, and I actually reached out right to him directly. I don't know why. I just picked him. I looked at all the I'm going to email Paul. He seems like a good dude. So I emailed him, and I told him, a little bit about myself, and he replied. And then I sent back, usually when I feel the way I feel right now, there was a priest that had ministered to my family since I was a young boy that I would reach out to. Even though I hadn't been going to church for probably 2 decades, I would still reach out to him and he would help me. And I made a crack to Paul in the email about, I loved him because he was the only priest that I've ever met that I've ever heard say a swear word. And it was because I broke one of his guitar strings once. And anyway, so Paul sent back an email that said, I love Seamus too. And I didn't even mention the priest's name. And he knew exactly who I was talking about. And I learned right after that he and I had a very, very similar upbringing. We were both from the East Bay, from the inner East Bay. My family was from San Lorenzo. He went to Moreau and Hayward. And so we kind of had a really good chat. I went and sat down with him and had a conversation over a cup of coffee at Pete's downtown. And I felt very logical, like I'm usually like I am right now, just super logical. But I felt a lot of emotion welling up in me when I was telling him stories. And I later learned that a lot of the things that I was struggling with, he had struggled with before too. And so he was very pragmatic and practical about what it meant to have faith, and that really, really drew me in. I think, in our faith we think about Jesus is fully divine and fully human, and Paul really, really, really got that fully human part. He understood what that was, and that helped me a lot. And so I wanted to be near him. I wanted to learn from him. And eventually you too.
No, in just remembering Paul, I went back on our website, there are 110 video homilies of Paul, right? And there's the Adult Faith Formation January series that he did back in 2014, I believe, and again in 2016. But he said it's about living. Right? Faith is about living, just simply living, and he was able to demonstrate that somehow, or connect to people wherever they were in that. Right?
Yep, exactly. He met you where you were, I would say.
Yeah.
And then so we would bring him into Monday nights, right? Talk about your experience with Paul and Monday nights, or how he sort of led you on.
Yeah. So just to bring everyone back, 2013 was when Paul, at least to many of the community, it's like he came back to CCOP. So for me, everything is brand new. I mean, what I want to add is I came into the church with no prior religious background whatsoever. So everything was brand new, including the priest, because he was literally, I joined RCIA, started attending inquiry, and then he showed up, said, hi, I'm Paul Minnihan. I'm like, okay, so everything, brand new. So I just didn't have any preconceived notions of any sort. But as I was entering, getting into the program, I mean, when he speaks, it's like you naturally, I'm not sure you guys, I feel like I'm just at the edge of my seat. The minute he opens his mouth, it's like, you better listen. Something. He just has this way of commanding your attention. But clearly, the one thing, I mean, obviously, because it was the Easter Vigil, I was baptized in 2014. He said in his homily, know who you are and act accordingly. And for whatever reason, that just stuck to me. Always know who you are and act accordingly. Because every day we get, especially lots going on, it's very easy to lose ourselves. And just Paul has a way of just saying the very content-rich stuff in a simple sentence, and then it stays with you, and it commands you to deliberate, to think about it, even when you leave the church.
Know who you are, act accordingly. For me, it's why we do what we do. It's very similar, right? Why we do what we do. It's trying to make the mystery, the difficult concepts, just translating our faith into ways that we can understand.
Yep. I think one of my favorite stories about Paul was I went up I lived right down the street, so I would come up and visit him in the mornings and certain times, just come up and talk to him. And I had an appointment with him, and I walked up, and I was just getting back into church, and my favorite prayer has always been the Hail Mary. I just love it, and I don't know why, but I have always loved it since I was like a 6-year-old boy. But it'd been so long that I couldn't really remember how to say it right. And so I got there a little early, and I went to the grotto, and I was just sitting there, and I was in like peace of mind and quiet, and I started meditating because that's what I had taken up in the years that I wasn't, in the church. Well, I realized I kind of lost track of time when I was doing that, and at one point, Paul had come out to find me, and I look over and he was sitting next to me, and he's like, "You're meditating?" And I'm like, "Yeah, hey," And he asked me, "Have you ever meditated to the Hail Mary?" Which was just like, well, no, show me how to do that. And so we sat there and practically walked through meditative prayer that I didn't even realize was, a style of prayer that we could do. But it was really, it sort of like speaks to that practical, pragmatic approach that he had, the human idea. He realized what I was trying to do, and he gave me a clue in how to do it in a way that would resonate with me better on the inside. And so we're doing the Hail Mary, breathe out full of grace, and it's something that I do every morning. Like now, I still do it. I sit on my couch in the dark with the TV off, and I do about 10 or so, and just breathe in and breathe out, and start your day perfect. And I learned that from him. It was awesome.
And I'm thinking of what I remember from Paul is when he first came, he wanted to make liturgy more crisp for our community, right? And so we would process, the book of the Gospels, right? And we would reverence the book of the Gospels. And, he went through that series to explain. I mean, he spent an hour or an hour and a half just talking about the introductory rite, right? And then he talked about, the liturgy of the Eucharist, right? And the altar where this is where heaven and earth unite.
Yes.
Right? And he tied it all together, and he was saying, if you're going to walk from Bethlehem to Jerusalem, you got to start walking. You can't understand it until you start walking. So you need to walk.
Yeah.
Understand it later, but you need to start walking.
Yeah.
And your kids need to start walking.
Yeah.
He was always very much into the signs and symbols, remember? Signs
and symbols. That was the other
symbols. And for me, again, it's like I find going to church with Paul presiding, it's like it's almost like everything coming to life, as if you travel back in time. He just has a way of just making everything come alive.
The other story is at the cathedral. I think of Paul, and I think of the cathedral, right? Because when the cathedral was being constructed, he was the liaison between the diocese and the architect and the construction company. So he knows the history, the stories, everything about the cathedral, right? And so as RCIA, we go there and we get a tour of the cathedral, and it's like a mini retreat because there's so much theology and symbolism with the light and the shadows and the water and the mausoleum underneath with the floor that the light shines through and all of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so we set it up one year where the bishop would meet us on the plaza by the doors where we would meet, and we thought it would just be, a meet and greet with the bishop for the RCIA catechumens and candidates. We thought, take a picture with the bishop, and then he would go back to, whatever bishops do. But the bishop stayed. And Paul was on fire on this tour that he gave. And he was pointing things out, and this, unbelievable.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So, hour and a half later, okay, tour ends. I go up to the bishop, and I thank him, and I said, I thought you were just going to stay for like 10 minutes or whatever. And And he said, no, I've heard so much about Paul's tour, I had to have this. I wouldn't miss the opportunity, right?
Yeah, that's another thing about Paul that I think as a person who knew and appreciated him, he did everything with intent. He had an intention, you know, and it was just, I'm smiling thinking about walking around the cathedral with him right now, you know. It's like,
So you've done that.
Yep. And he had, I mean, there was a reason for everything, and it's just, you know, it's who he was, I think. So, you know, a guy who thought things through in a way that you maybe didn't quite understand until you talked to him about it, you know.
Yeah. Have you ever had a reconciliation confession with Paul?
I had one.
I always say, don't do it unless you really want to go deep, because yeah.
I never did.
You never did?
No, not with Paul, no.
But I must admit, what I thought I was expecting, say so many Hail Marys, and no, one time he's like, you know, Sue, you just have to just go to someone. I'm not talking about someone professional, just get it out your systems. Just get it out. Do the beef session, whatever. And I'm thinking, okay, that was not what I expect out of my confession, was his right. But it was just so sound, but that was exactly what I needed.
Yep.
You know, you expect, Paul, say so many prayers. Nope. Just let it out.
Yep, let it go.
Can I ask about Paul helped you with the divorce, right? Through
Yes.
the annulment and all of that. Say something about that and maybe the ending piece.
The annulment process, yeah. Okay, so the church did not require me to go through annulment, just to be clear. And in general, and for me going through the annulment process, I actually surprised the church, because generally people go through annulment, it's in preparation for marriage or remarriage in this case, right? For me, that wasn't the case. Went through the program RCIA, and I just wanted to be right with the church. And I felt just through my learning that it wasn't right, that I wanted my marriage annulled, because it wasn't a marriage of how I would view just the teaching of my faith. And so going through it, Paul was my sponsor, I guess that's the word, and I had to fill all these questions. And the first time, which I thought I did I went deep, but Paul's like, okay, we need a little bit deeper. So it's like, I mean, this is like it's a document. It's like I went on a 3-day retreat to complete it, and you just, and he just was getting me to go deeper and deeper, and so it was a 1.5-year journey. Yeah. Do you want to say that it actually got rejected the first time? I'll just say it. Totally crushing for me.
And that can be, I mean, the annulment, it's a wonderful tool for healing and all that stuff, but to go through all of that work, and I know what you did.
Yeah, it was.
And then for the tribunal to come back and say,
no.
No.
No. And
you kept going, and Paul kept.
Well, yeah, Paul said resubmit. I'm like, I just put out my heart onto this thing. And he's like, no, I want you to resubmit, and and so I did. And it was, I could have just stopped because I got what I wanted in a way the first two, because but I did. And then 6 months later, then Paul's like, okay,
And it came through.
And yeah.
That's the way.
That was how it was. But yes, so Paul was part of that journey, and I must say, going through that, it was tough. It was tough, and it was always my intention to, after all that, Paul and I need to talk about that process too in and of itself, and it was always our intention to talk about it. And I'm sad to say, I come and say, okay, Paul, we got to talk. He goes, yep, just make an appointment, and through his schedule, my schedule, and we never did. And it was on our to-do list to talk about the experience of that, because I was just so loaded that experience, you know. Yeah.
But he helped you, he helped so many people, right? I mean,
Yes,
so many
yes.
people. And these are just, me, you.
These are just two
couple-
perspectives.
Right, but
Yeah.
it's, dozens, hundreds of people that he was able to connect with and touch. What do you bring with you now? What do you carry with you now in memory of Paul? For me, it might be just the idea of a simple but crisp liturgy with intent and purpose. We don't need the carnival, right? We can
Yes.
I would say his words, you mentioned it, but I even use it with my work every day. Less is more, land the plane.
land the plane. I wrote that one down.
Unpack. Like he always say, let's unpack this.
Yes.
And literally I could experience him truly doing the unpacking of something that is fairly rich
Yeah.
and complex,
Yeah.
and unpack it to the consumable parts, or the parts that we can take with us
Yep.
and integrate with. So all those words, when I hear those words now, when other people use it, I think of Paul.
Yep. When I think about him, I really think about how excited I would be to, like you were mentioning, how many homilies he has on the website, but how when I would come in on a Sunday and because they would all rotate, but I would be there would be something exciting to me that I knew he was going to give a homily. I just loved the way that he saw the world and that insight. I think it's all related, right? The idea that he met you where you were and then he pulled you along to where you needed to be, or where without really telling you where you needed to be, he would help you find your way to where you needed to be. And it would come across when he would talk to all of us, in a big room. And I think all the time about the very last homily I ever heard him give, which was, he was talking about Mary when she went to visit Elizabeth. And it ties back to the Hail Mary because he was talking about the blessed are you amongst women. And he said that though it doesn't say it in there, he's 100% sure that that when Elizabeth told Mary that blessed are you amongst women, that Mary said, no, blessed are you. And that she told her how she felt. And as a result, the message that he was getting across was always tell people how you feel about them. Make sure they understand how important they are to you. And that was, it's hard for me to talk about. It was just right before he was gone. And that particular message is something that I live all the time now. I make sure that I tell people, whoever they are, like my brother, my sister, my mom, my friend that I haven't talked to in 20 years, you were very important to me at this particular point. This is one of the things that you did for me. And that sort of level of gratitude, it's insane. And he had a way of making things like that so plainly clear and tying it directly to the scripture that he was talking to you about, and gave you a way to live that, like you said, live it. Like that was very important to him. And he taught you how to do that without telling you, like he just kind of laid it out there. And his homilies were pretty legendary to me. But that one is one that burns, it's still in there.
I wanted to add, he also has a way with kids.
Yes.
I was thinking about that too
Yeah.
with Michaela. Right?
My daughter, you said her name, wasn't me. She said, don't say my name. She told me to say she loves Paul. She loves Paul. She actually had her first reconciliation with Paul, which I said, you can pick any piece. She just drags, went to Paul. And she just, I don't know how he can connect, just how good he is with kids too, right?
Yeah.
And that's how he got
On
taped.
so many different levels.
Yeah,
The taping,
taping out,
the duct
and
tape.
so my daughter still talks about him all the time at home, and she would console me, and it's like, it's just, anyway, to me it's amazing because, you think kid, distant priest, right? You'd think
Yeah,
there'll be some
yeah.
distance, right?
But it's kid, it's adults, but then
Yeah.
it's also, you know, higher than that. I mean, his brain, he could mix it up with anybody, right? I mean,
Yep.
he was just really sharp, but then
Yeah.
down to earth and just, you know.
Practicality, the pragmatism, like whatever it is, I don't know how to describe the word, but you're right. It was like that human half of Jesus, the fully human part of Jesus. He just really espoused it, lived it, and he got it. I miss him terribly, but also there are a lot of things that he gave me that I carry with me every day. You know, he was in the difference in my situation and yours was that when I met Paul, my marriage had fallen apart and I was trying to put it back together. And he was instrumental in asking me questions that checked, you know, my intention. And he also helped me forgive myself for the stupid things that I'd done that had caused my family to be in that situation, and helped me figure out how to rebuild what was better than was before. And, you know, my wife loves Paul, even though she's not Catholic. She doesn't come to church, but every time she loved Paul. He was just a force in my life that is always going to be there, no matter what, you know.
Yeah.
An amazing guy. Sorry, it gives me a little...
Well, thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Sue. You know, it's been 2 years. We miss Paul. We love Paul. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for spending your time with us.